My English learning journey. My journey with English began long before I even realized it. Living in London, you're surrounded by the English language, but that doesn't always mean you're fluent or even comfortable speaking it. I remember my first day, stepping out onto the streets, hearing the fast-paced conversations around me, and feeling completely overwhelmed. You see, back in my home country, English wasn't a language I spoke much. I knew the basics, sure, but when you're in an English-speaking country, those basics can feel like they vanish in an instant. It felt like everyone knew some secret code that I hadn't yet cracked. Words flew by faster than I could catch them, and I often found myself nodding along in conversations, pretending to understand. I realized early on that if I wanted to feel at home here, I needed to dive deep into learning English. And so, the journey began. I started with simple things, greeting people, asking for directions, and picking up small phrases from everyday interactions. One of the first things I noticed was how differently people in London speak compared to what I had learned in textbooks. The accents, the slang, even the way people shortened sentences, it was all new to me. But that's what made it exciting. It wasn't just about learning English from books. It was about experiencing it. After a few weeks of struggling on my own, I decided to take English classes. I found a local language school in London that offered courses specifically for beginners like me. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness on my first day. Would I be able to keep up with the other students? Would I feel out of place? One of the best decisions I made during my learning journey was to enroll in those classes. Being in a structured environment helped me build a solid foundation in grammar and vocabulary. And the teachers were fantastic. They didn't just teach us the rules of English. They gave us practical examples and encouraged us to speak as much as possible, no matter how many mistakes we made. They often reminded us that mistakes were a part of the learning process, and that comforted me. In one of our lessons, the teacher introduced the idea of chunking, breaking down sentences into manageable parts. For example, instead of memorizing entire sentences, we would learn phrases like, "Could you help me with?" or "I'm looking for." These chunks helped me communicate more easily and naturally in everyday situations. It made me realize that learning a language isn't just about memorizing words, it's about understanding how to use them in context. As I continued my journey, I quickly realized that listening was one of the most important skills I needed to develop. At first, I struggled to understand native speakers, especially when they spoke quickly. But over time, I found strategies that helped me improve. One of the things that worked for me was listening to English podcasts and radio shows. I would put them on in the background while doing other tasks, and even though I didn't understand everything at first, slowly but surely, my ears started to adjust to the rhythm and speed of the language. One of the podcasts I started listening to was about London's history. It was a simple show, but it allowed me to connect with the city I was living in while improving my English. The hosts spoke clearly, but there were still times when I had to rewind and listen to the same sentence multiple times before I got it. And that's okay. Repetition became my friend. One thing I noticed was that after about a month of listening consistently, I could pick up on about 60 to 70% of what was being said without having to pause. It was an amazing feeling. I started to apply this method to other areas of my life too, watching TV shows with English subtitles, listening to English music, and even eavesdropping on conversations while riding the bus. Of course, my learning journey wasn't always smooth. There were days when I felt discouraged, especially when I struggled to express myself. I remember one particularly frustrating experience at a cafe. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say in my head, but when it came time to order my coffee, I completely froze. I couldn't remember a single word. The barista was kind and patient, but I felt embarrassed. It's moments like these that test your confidence. But what I learned is that it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to feel awkward sometimes. The key is not to give up. After that cafe incident, I made a promise to myself. I would speak English every chance I got, even if it felt uncomfortable. Another challenge I faced was understanding British humor. Londoners have a unique sense of humor, and at first, a lot of jokes went over my head. But instead of feeling left out, I took it as an opportunity to learn more about the culture. Humor is such a big part of communication, and once I started to understand it, I felt more connected to the people around me. As time went on, I began to see real progress. One of the milestones I remember vividly was my first full conversation in English without any major pauses or misunderstandings. It was with a fellow learner at my language school, and we talked about our favorite books. It wasn't a deep conversation by any means, but it flowed naturally. I also started to notice small wins in my daily life. I could understand announcements at train stations, I could ask for help in shops without hesitation, and I even started making friends who were native speakers. These victories, however small, fueled my motivation to keep going. Let's talk about real-life situations that tested my language skills in ways I didn't expect. One of the first instances that come to mind was my first trip to the bank in London. It sounds simple, right? But as a beginner in English, even something as routine as opening a bank account became a nerve-wracking experience. I remember rehearsing my lines before I stepped into the bank. I'd like to open a bank account. What documents do I need to bring? And can you explain the process to me? It seemed straightforward enough, but the moment I walked in, I was hit with jargon that I hadn't prepared for. Terms like debit card, direct debit, sort code, and standing order flew over my head. I had to ask the banker to slow down and explain these terms to me, and thankfully they were understanding. But it made me realize that learning English wasn't just about vocabulary and grammar. It was about learning the specific words and phrases I would need for different situations. If you're just starting out on your English learning journey, I encourage you to focus on the vocabulary and phrases that are most relevant to your daily life. If you're living in an English-speaking country, like I was in London, think about the things you do every day. Going to the grocery store, taking public transport, visiting the doctor, or even going to the post office. Learn the words and phrases you'll need in those specific scenarios. For example, if you're heading to the supermarket, make sure you know how to ask, "Where can I find the bread?" Or, "Do you have any vegetarian options?" Knowing these basic phrases will boost your confidence and make everyday interactions smoother. One thing I struggled with, especially in the beginning, was pronunciation. Even when I knew the right words to say, sometimes I would pronounce them incorrectly, and people would look at me with puzzled expressions. English, especially British English, has a lot of sounds that are different from other languages, and mastering those sounds takes practice. One of my earliest challenges was the difference between words like live and leave. I remember trying to tell someone, "I live in London," but because I pronounced it wrong, they thought I said, "I leave in London." It was confusing for both of us. I started focusing more on pronunciation by practicing with online resources. There are so many great tools out there that let you listen to native speakers and repeat after them. I would spend 10 to 15 minutes a day just practicing difficult sounds, like the th sound in words like this and that, and the short I sound in words like bit and sit. Little by little, my pronunciation improved, and I became more confident speaking English in public. If pronunciation is something you struggle with, I highly recommend using language apps that focus on speaking. Some apps even use AI to analyze your speech and give you feedback on how to improve. Another great way to work on pronunciation is by practicing with native speakers. Whether it's through language exchange programs or casual conversations, hearing and mimicking how native speakers pronounce words is incredibly helpful. Learning a language is a lot like going to the gym. You can't expect to see results if you only work out once a month. Similarly, you can't expect to become fluent in English if you only practice every now and then. What worked for me was setting aside time every day to work on my English, even if it was just 15 or 20 minutes. I would split my time between different activities. Some days I would focus on listening to podcasts. Other days I would work on grammar exercises. And some days I would just sit down and try to write a short paragraph in English. The key was consistency. By doing a little bit each day, I found that my progress snowballed over time. I started keeping a journal in English. At first, my sentences were simple and full of mistakes. But as the weeks went on, I noticed that I was able to write longer, more complex sentences without as much effort. Plus, writing every day helped me remember new words and phrases that I had learned during my lessons or in everyday life. The most important thing you can do is to make English a regular part of your routine. Even if you're busy, try to find small pockets of time throughout your day to practice. While you're waiting for the bus, during your lunch break, or even while cooking dinner. The more you practice, the more natural the language will feel. There were definitely moments in my journey where I felt like giving up. Learning a new language can be exhausting, and there were times when I felt like I wasn't making any progress at all. But the truth is, progress isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, and you don't notice it until one day you realize you can understand a conversation or read an article without much effort. One of the things that kept me going was setting small, achievable goals. I didn't focus on becoming fluent overnight. That would have been too overwhelming. Instead, I set smaller goals, like learning 10 new words a week, or being able to hold a 5-minute conversation without switching to my native language. I also rewarded myself when I hit those goals. After a month of consistent practice, I treated myself to a new book or a fun activity in London. Celebrating these small victories made the journey more enjoyable and kept me motivated, even on the days when I felt frustrated. If you're feeling discouraged, try setting small goals that you can achieve within a week or a month. Focus on progress, not perfection. And don't forget to celebrate your achievements, no matter how small they may seem. Each step forward is a sign that you're improving. One of the most rewarding aspects of learning English in London was the chance to immerse myself in the culture. Language isn't just about words. It's about the culture and history behind those words. By exploring the city and engaging with its people, I learned so much more than I ever could from a textbook. I visited museums, attended local events, and tried to strike up conversations with locals whenever I could. London is such a multicultural city, and I found that people were generally kind and willing to help me practice my English. I also made friends from all over the world, each of us learning English together while sharing our own cultures and experiences. If you're learning English in an English-speaking country, take advantage of every opportunity to engage with the culture. Visit museums, watch local TV shows, read newspapers, and try to have conversations with locals. The more you immerse yourself, the faster you'll learn. Now that I've shared my journey, I'd like to offer some advice to anyone just starting out on their own English learning journey. First, be patient with yourself. Learning a language takes time, and there will be days when it feels like you're not making progress. But trust me, you are. Every time you learn a new word, a new phrase, or understand something you didn't before, you're getting better. Second, immerse yourself in the language as much as possible. Surround yourself with English in your daily life, whether it's through podcasts, TV shows, books, or conversations with others. The more you expose yourself to the language, the more comfortable you'll become with it. Lastly, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I can't stress this enough. Mistakes are part of the learning process, and the more you speak, the more you'll improve. And that brings us to the end of today's story. I hope my story has inspired you to continue on your own journey. Remember, learning English is a marathon, not a sprint. Celebrate the small victories, stay persistent, and before you know it, you'll be having those conversations with confidence. Thank you for tuning in to Explore English Online. If you enjoyed this story and found it helpful, be sure to subscribe and share it with others who might benefit. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious.